Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to the first of our monthly TOI sessions. We've got 5 new exciting REST features to talk to you about today. The first one is REST URL standardization. So we heard you about the REST URLs not really looking quite so standard, but in Jade 2022 we've given you the tools to fix that. First of those tools is that .json and .xml in the URL. Yeah, you don't need it anymore. Jade will now respect the content type and accept headers. The other thing that you don't need is the app name in the query string. You can now define a Jade default app in your Jade HTTP ini file, and Jade will automatically resolve anything that doesn't have the app name in the query string to that. Number 2, pagination. In Jade 2022, you can now use pagination. Jade will check the query string of any incoming REST request for a limit and either an offset or a key value pair, and then use that for pagination. We've also got new mechanisms for getting the next page of results when using pagination, using either the link header or envelope body methods. Number 3, multipart form data. So previously, what Jade would do with multipart form data is it would actually convert it to form URL encoded, which really wasn't very useful. What Jade will do now is it will actually take those multiparts and it will pass them as parameters to the REST method. Much more useful. Number 4, ISO 8601 support. So previously, Jade used Microsoft date format for dates and times, which is quite an old format that no one really uses anymore. But now in Jade 2022, we support ISO 8601 format, which is much more standard, much more useful, much more compatible with everything else. Number 5, HTTP headers control. In Jade 2022, we've made some enhancements to the REST client. You can now add, remove, modify, and view any request headers from the Jade REST client. Thank you. At Jade, we're really excited about these new features. If you want to learn more about them, we've got an upcoming whiteboard session where Ty and I will go into depth about how they all work. Hi, I'm Tim. This is Ty. Welcome to the first one of our monthly bite-sized TOI whiteboard sessions. We're going to be talking today about the new REST improvements in Jade 2022. And let's get straight into it, Ty?
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So the first thing I think that we should talk about is we've made some changes to the way that the URLs work for Jade REST services. So this is kind of what the various parts, I guess, of what's going to be in a REST URL. So you can see there's a bunch of parts to it. Some of them we need, some of them we don't. So this server name, this is going to be localhost or whatever it is, wherever the server is on the internet, you're always going to need that part. This IIS app, so that's going to be something like, Jade REST or, My Shop 123, whatever it is, that's going to be within IIS telling IIS what particular REST service we're doing. We're also always going to need that. This is the first of the parts that's a little bit funny that people tend to go, oh, do we really need to have this in our URL? And the answer is kind of we don't. What this does is it tells IIS, this should be DLL, not any. This tells IIS which DLL to use to forward the requests onto so that we can handle it. Now, there is a handler mapping for it's called IS API that determines where to send things, and you can put whatever rule you want in there or whatever name you want in there. By default, it's going to be star.dll, and it's going to send whatever ends in DLL to the Jade HTTP DLL you set up. You don't actually have to keep that as the default of star.dll. You can change that to whatever you like. anything that's sensible. This isn't actually a new feature in Jade 2022. You've actually always been able to do this, but a lot of people don't seem to realize this. I see a lot of Jade HTTP DLLs in the URLs, and I've also had some people ask me, oh, do we really need that? No, you don't need that.
So how could I have done that before?
So you could always do this. You go into the IIS settings, you go into the handler mappings into IS API, and you'll see a thing that says star.dll. Just change that to whatever you want, and that's what they'll be putting in instead of the Jade HTTP DLL. And so you can have it something business sensible. So that's the first one that we can we can rename it, but we'll say we can get rid of that. Now, this next part's the resource. So that's going to be, let's say that you're trying to get all of the customers. You'll put, like all customers there or whatever it is. Maybe you're trying to get customer number 123. You'd put customer/123. That again, we're always going to need that. Now this next one, you won't always see these in URLs, but this is the content type. You can put .json or .xml in there. Looks a bit yucky, it's not really very standard. And the reason that we had to do this previously if you wanted to use XML is there's actually an HTTP header called the accept header. There's another one for the content type, basically same thing. We previously just ignored that header and we were looking in the URL to determine whether we're using XML or not. That's a bit silly. So what we can do now is we can actually just put that in the content type for a post or the accept for a get, and the Jade REST services will automatically actually check that now and respect that header, so you never have to put .xml or anything like that in there anymore. You still can if you want, like if you've already got your stuff set up and you're putting .xml in your requests, we will still respect it. And in fact, if you put .xml, then we'll override everything else. We'll go, okay, you clearly definitely want to do XML. We will definitely listen to you there. But you don't have to put that anymore. We can actually just completely get rid of that.
So how did I set the content type?
When you make a request from the client side, then you can set the content type header. How that works will depend on what sort of client you're using. So for instance, for the Jade REST client, you can just call the method, set content type and set it to whatever it should be. Cool. Now this last one, this is probably the one I've heard most about, the app name in the query string. So probably everyone's very familiar with this. Anytime you've got a Jade REST service, you've got the question mark and then you've got the name of the app. And that's kind of annoying, like you don't really want to be having this app in your query string, partially because it looks yucky, partially because that's nothing like what anyone else does, and partially because we want to use query string for other things. It's annoying to use the query string if you've got a stupid app name in there. So one of the big new features that we've got in 2022 is you can actually set up in the Jade HTTP ini file a Jade default app section. And what the Jade default app section will do is it will be what IIS will point to, what the request will point to, whenever you don't include an app name. So you can still do it the old way if you want to. But if I just cut this out and I don't put the app name in the query string, but I've set up I don't know if this is readable, Jade default app, and then I put all my settings. I put my ports and what sort of web services it is and all of that good stuff in there, in my ini file. Then the request will go to that section and I don't need to have that anymore. So I can actually make this URL way, way simpler now in 2022 using these three things. And it's going to look really just like it would for any other REST service.
Can I only do one of them?
You can only define one per Jade HTTP ini file. You can set up an IIS to point to different ini files if you want. So you just set up different applications and point them to different ones. But the Jade default app, there'll be one per one ini file. Any questions? Will that sound good to you, TOI?
I've heard a lot of complaints about the app name, so it sounds pretty good.
Brilliant. So yeah, this is part of a move to try and make our REST really as awesome as it can be to make everyone's lives easier, which is pretty cool. So I guess the next thing to talk about will be another exciting new feature, which is pagination. So this is another one that we've heard quite a lot about. Sometimes you've got your REST service and it's returning a collection, and sometimes you've got a million things in the collection. You're really not wanting to send a million objects down the line. It's going to be a bit sad. So we have the technology to paginate it. How that's going to work is you can actually set, now that we've got this query string safe and available, we can set some query string parameters that will determine pagination. And then we've also got a mechanism for, once you've got a page of data, getting the next page and the next page. So there's three things that we would start respecting. The first is limit. I'm actually going to switch colour. I think this red is not that good. Limit. So if I go, in my query string, I put something like limit equals 10, what that will mean is that for any request that has limit equals 10 in the query string, instead of giving back the whole collection, I will just give back 10 entries. Set that to whatever you want. That's how many entries you get back. Now this will just out of the back box automatically happen from 2022 with any REST service that returns a collection. Now, as well as just saying, well, I want to get 10 objects in my collection, which 10 is the obvious question. Now, you could just put limit 10 and it will just give you the first 10, up to the server, whatever the first 10 in the collection are. If it's an array, it'll be, index 1 to index 10. If it's a dictionary, whatever's, alphabetically or whatever the sort order is, the first 10. We'd probably want to not always get the first 10. That would not be quite so awesome. So there's another couple. We've got offset. Now, offset is the sort of thing that you might use if it's just numbered, like an array would be. So I could say like offset equals 20, and that will start from position 20 and then give you whatever you've put for the limit, give you that many. More commonly, you tend to have these in a dictionary or something. You'd have a key. Let's say it's all your customers and it's based on their name. So you can actually also just put a key value pair in the query string. So I could put something like name equals Smith, and let's say that this is a last name. Oh, if I can write correctly. Let's say that Smith is a last name and that happens to be the key in your collection. So I can put name equals Smith, and what it will do is it will start at Smith, the first Smith it finds if there happens to be duplicates, and then it will give you from the limit. And so that's how you're going to get your first page of results.
Name, obviously the property on.
Yes, so name will be the exact property that it's keyed by. Once you've got the first page, the next obvious question is, can I actually just get all of them, just get them 10 at a time? So we've got some mechanisms for going and getting more. There's kind of two main strategies of how you can do this. The first strategy is called a link header. And in a link header, what you do is you put all of the information about how to get the next page in one of the HTTP headers. And then the server will read off that HTTP header, get that many, pass back the result, and modify the response header, the link header, so that you can just keep passing and it will automatically do everything really nicely for you. So that's one way you can do it, and that's it's kind of actually the easiest to implement in Jade as well, because that's how we'll do it by default. So if you've got any REST service that returns a collection, and you just return a collection, if you get any request in that has a limit and an offset or whatever, we will automatically put in the link header as part of the response, and then the client can use that link header to get the next page results. And basically how it works is the link header is going to have URLs, including all the right query strings, to normally the first page of results, the next page of results, maybe the previous one if it makes sense in the context, and the last. How many of those will depend on what sort of collection it is, whether it's easy to know how to go backwards and forwards and that sort of thing.
So is it just in the link header, is it just information like this?
For offset-based ones, yes. For dictionary ones, there's one kind of gotcha we have to think about, which is what if you've got like 10 people whose last name is Smith, and you're doing limit 10, you might just get stuck with that, right? So there's actually another kind of header, which is another kind of query string, which is basically it's a base 64 object ID, encoded object ID, and we call it a cursor. It's actually referring to a specific object. Now, that wouldn't make any sense whatsoever to a client, so we wouldn't make a client type that in because they wouldn't know what to put. But when the server's passing it back, they actually can know exactly what object should be next. So we'll actually give you the specific object that you should go for next. And in that way, you could have even 20 Smiths with limit 10 and happily go through all of them because we're going based on object rather than just key. So that's probably the easiest. There is another way, which is it's called the envelope body strategy. So rather than putting all of this pagination information into one of your headers, you have the same information, but instead we're going to put it actually as part of the body. So the way that works is instead of just passing back the objects as your response, you actually wrap that in an object, in an envelope. And that envelope is going to have the pagination information, like how to get to the next page, as one of the properties, and then another property will be the actual data. So this is the technique that's used by, I think it's like Google and Facebook, and a lot of the big players do it this way. It's a little bit more to play with, but it's really compatible with other things. And I should mention that all of this pagination stuff, this is server-side and also with REST client. So all of this will work nicely for your Jade REST servers. Also, if you're trying to consume a server as a client, we can do all of this from Jade REST client. So there is a set limit and offset method on Jade REST request where you can pass in your values and it'll put in the query string for you. We have on Jade REST response a get next page method that all you have to do is you've got your response back and you've pulled out your data. I can actually just take that response object. I can call get next page. What that's going to do is it's actually going to check in that link header all the pagination, the envelope body, and it's going to get the next page for you. And you can keep doing this. It just gives you a new REST response for the next set. You can keep doing it and use it just like reading a book.
Can I skip ahead?
It will depend on the nature of the collection. So for just a number index collection like an array, then yes, you can go to whatever offset you want. For a dictionary, you might not know what key to go to. So that you normally have to go through like that with a dictionary because you don't necessarily know where to go because you won't know what all the keys are. But if you do happen to know, then you can, yes. And that will be something that the server can give you a hint at, because when it gives you back the pagination information, if it's something where it can just give you the next page, then it will just give you a link to next page. If it's something where it actually knows the first page and the last page and the next page and the previous page, then it can give you all of those. And we've got methods to actually, is there a next page? Can I go to first page? All of that sort of good stuff.
Cool.
Cool. So that's pagination. Let's talk about the third one, move things along a little bit. This is actually, we've kind of done the big ones now. Smaller one is multipart form data from server side. So one of the content types, I guess, that you can have is a multipart form data where you have multiple bits of data all in one body with a little bit of kind of packaging around it. Traditionally, it was used when you're submitting a form from a website, and that's why it's called form data, and it's multiparts because there's multiple bits to it. What Jade used to do with this was a bit funny, right? What it used to do is it used to take this lovely body that the clients created and it would just mangle it and would put it in a different format called the URL encoded, which basically, it was in the body, but it looked like a query string. So it's like key value pairs separated by commas. It also wouldn't actually pass that data to the REST method. So you get to the REST method, it wouldn't have any parameters. And so you would have actually had to hand write some code to pull out these parameters and do anything useful with them. It basically didn't do anything useful. Now, in 2022, we have basically made it work how you probably expect it to work, which is it pulls out each one of the multiparts and it just puts them each one in a parameter, and then you can use it just like you would with any other REST method. Now, because this changes existing behavior, we've just got a toggle switch. So in the ini file, you just set use new style multipart equals true. That turns it on. Cool. Any questions about that, or was that a bit of an easier one?
That's an easier one.
Yeah.
Does it do it for SOAP services as well?
No, so multipart, it's a specifically REST kind of content type. You won't see these in SOAP messages. Right, next one is just a new format for dates and times, ISO 8601. So if you've ever got a date or a time back from a Jade REST service, you've probably seen that it's a really weird format where you've got a whole lot of slashes and brackets, and then it's got a massive number, and that's basically what you've got. I forget what it's something like number of seconds since the Unix epoch, or something like milliseconds since Unix epoch. It's very unhuman readable. You can't really do much with it. It used to be a really common format a very long time ago, and now almost no one uses it. So what we've done is we've added support for ISO 8601, which is how people do things these days, and it's really easy to turn on. So for your REST service, there's just going to be a new checkbox in your REST application definition. You just check that checkbox, use ISO 8601, and that will use that one. For Jade JSON class, we can do this as well. There's just a property on Jade JSON of use ISO 8601. You just set that to true, and we'll use the new format. So one thing we've tried to do is not break existing behavior. So anything that changes the way something works, we've just got a toggle for it.
What does the new format look like?
So the new format is going to be like, thank you kindly. It's going to be like, say, 2012-11-04. So you got year, month, day, and then it just goes, I think it's like, hours, I think minutes, I'll just go SS, and it goes like that. So it goes from the biggest amount of time through to the smallest amount of time, starting at years, going all the way down to milliseconds. And then it'll also have, I may have got the dashes and the colons in the wrong places, but that's the gist of it. And then it'll also have a timestamp offset to communicate time zone information. Most importantly, you can actually read it as a time and you go, oh yeah, I see what time that is, as opposed to the other one where it will be like some random ridiculously big number that doesn't, unless you happen to know how many seconds it's been since the Unix epoch, which I don't. Cool. So yeah, another nice, easy little benefit for people there. The very last thing I guess to talk about is, this is so specifically a Jade REST client improvement. One thing that we've heard is people wanted more control over HTTP headers when using the Jade REST client. So previously we had various methods to set specific headers that you'd often use. So you could set your authorization header, you could set your content type, things like that. But we're limited by an interface exactly what headers you could and couldn't set. We wanted to be a lot more generous about that and basically let you do whatever you wanted. There are still some restrictions of what is possible to do. So to give one example, we can't really let you set the content length because the content length is automatically determined by reading off what the content length actually is. It's going to mess things up if you try and manually set that. So there's some headers that by the laws of the internet you're not allowed to change. So what we do is we do give you a little bit of validation there that there's some particular forbidden headers you're not allowed to change. Other than that, you can just arbitrarily set headers to whatever you like. You can read off what the headers are going to be. You can modify them. You can delete headers. You have basically almost full control over what headers are going to be sent with your Jade REST request.
what happens if I try and set one of these illegal headers?
Then it will just return an error. So the method that you call will give you...
Which is?
So it will return an integer from the method that represents whether the header was successfully set or not, and there's a constant for set or not set. So you won't get an exception, it will just not set that header, and then you've got a way to check whether it did or not. It should be super obvious, because the only restrictions on what you're allowed to do is there are certain headers you're not allowed to do, and as long as you're not passing that in,
is there a list of those headers?
There is. We've got it on the documentation, the exact list of what you're not allowed to change. It's a pretty standard list. You can also find it on the internet. And yeah, we've also, I believe, got a method for you can pass in a header. It'll just tell you whether that's a header you're allowed or not. I'm pretty sure we've got that one.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks for being with me here today, Ty, as we went through these and asking some interesting questions. And thanks to the audience for coming with us and listening in on our first whiteboard session. It's the first one we've done of these. We're going to do one of these each month. So we're going to kind of, our bite-sized TIs, we'll have one of these each month. Obviously, this is the first one we've done. Hopefully you've all enjoyed this. And thank you very much for listening.